Yeah, stealing the Olivet Discourse from us really is the greatest heist in history. I mean, there have been really big train robberies and things like that in the past, but the priceless words of Christ taken from us. And yeah, I know I'm a bit of a broken record here, but I don't hear other people talking about this. And it's not like it's some insignificant little thing. I know people come through here and they're like, why is this guy so adamant? He sees prophecy one way, other people see it a different way. Why does he get so mad? Because they don't understand what's going on, how we've been deceived. They've stolen the priceless words and teaching of our Lord about his return for his people, and he's due. And he's due. And wouldn't you know it, that complete ignorance that has taken place in the church happens in this generation when he is coming. The generation that is not paying attention to the signs that he gave, not even aware that the two of the three signs have been fulfilled, and the third one is on the day of his coming. So I want to talk about that again, and I want to show you how they are deceiving us. It's like a magician. I was thinking about that the other day. They're doing something very similar that a magician does. You know, when I was 8 years old, I had a magician's kit, and I never really was any good at it. But the famous cup and ball trick, you know, they'll have like 2 or 3 cups in front of them, and they lift one and go, okay, there it is. And then they just kind of wave their hands over stuff or maybe move them around a little bit. And suddenly you look and go, oh, it's gone. And it's over here. And he lifts the cup and there it is over there. Well, of course, it's a trick. All 3 cups have the same object in them. He just, when he wants it gone, he slightly squeezes the cup and takes the item with him. It's still there. When he wants to show it, he doesn't squeeze. It's misdirection. It's misdirection. This is what they're doing with us on the Olivet Discourse to get you to believe that it's not for us, it's for you. Christ demands that you pay attention to what he's saying. And what we've allowed them to do has got to stop. I don't see it stopping institutionally where it just, you know, some sort of revival inside the church where they realize their mistake. I'd love to see that, but I think it's going to be more of people individually taking back the Olivet Discourse and recognizing that they've been bamboozled. The people who watch a magic show know it's a trick. They know he's up to something. Unfortunately, the people sitting there listening to any of them, Pastor Laurie or Pastor whatever, fill in the name of somebody well-known, talking about the rapture of the church. Well, the rapture is coming, but it's coming because it's at the end of the times of the Gentiles, and it's not the day they are told it is. It's the day he is telling us it is. A much different day, a powerful day, a huge day, a day that calls for preparation leading up to that day, and a day that calls for a decision to be made on that day. Be ready to lose your life. That's what he tells us in Luke 17, on that day, and you better understand what he's talking about. Now, for the people who are just stopping by, I'm going to show you a couple of their tricks this week, and I'm going to show you a couple more next week. For the people who are already awake, I want you to see this so that you can help your family and friends grasp what's going on. They're deceiving us. I'm going to show you 2 very different ways they do it. The first way is the squeeze the ball trick, make it go away. In the Olivet Discourse, the Lord talks about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. 99.9% of all Christians on the planet are unaware that an abomination of desolation, the one spoken of by Daniel the prophet in Daniel 9, we'll talk more about that next week, took place in that temple. They're shocked when they find out. I was shocked when I found out. It's the reason I read Josephus. And they do not mention that or any of the myriad stories that Josephus, who was an eyewitness to the siege of Jerusalem that ended in the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem in 70 AD. He was there. He was a priest in the temple. He was the offspring of a chief priest. And his account is well known by historians, and it's respected. He's considered a very reliable observer to these events. And yet we know nothing about it because the church refuses to tell us about it, because they want you to believe that everything Jesus is saying about that temple and the abomination of desolation of that temple is going to be at a third temple. And they want the beast or the Antichrist to be the one who performs the abomination of desolation. If they can pick up and move the temple prophecies into the future, then they can pick up and move his discussion about his coming and move it to the very end. That's the ultimate goal. So doing this to the temple is a way and a means to get it also done when he describes his coming. They will say, that's the second coming. That's not the rapture of the church. That's the second coming, so it's not for us. It's called rightly dividing the truth. It's a lie. And you need to come back because that event that he's talking about is due. It could happen today. Literally, it could happen today. And the day that he's talking about ain't the day that 99+% of all Christians think is coming. It's not. His day is coming. See, take heed, he says. See, I have told you all things beforehand. Paul, when he talks about the rapture, is talking about the same thing. The fact that they don't mention the abomination of desolation that took place in that temple should tell you right out of the gate something is wrong here. There is no way anybody honest and forthright is going to leave that out. For crying out loud, that temple is a part of our heritage. No, we don't follow the law that was given to the nation of Israel. We follow a new covenant. He has written the law on our hearts, not in stone for us. But that temple is the temple that our Lord, as a young man, barely 12 years old, walked in and listened and taught and received teaching, and later did so many amazing things in and around that temple, calling it his Father's house. And then he gives predictions about it. And Josephus was there to record them, to tell us these predictions were fulfilled. And we don't know it. We don't know the name of the man who walked in there and took over the temple for almost 3.5 years. A man by the name of John of Gischala or Giscala, a little town in Israel. He was Jewish. And he committed the abomination of desolation. He took it over. And not only does Josephus say he's the reason the temple was destroyed, he goes further than that and says he's the reason Jerusalem got destroyed. And we don't know about this character because they don't want us to. If we know about it, selling us the idea that it's all about a third temple, not about that temple standing in front of Jesus on that day. No. It's a third temple. The Antichrist is going to commit the abomination of desolation. That's what they want. And that's what they try and get. And in this case, they show us that, there's nothing there to see. And we don't have enough, generally, we don't have enough knowledge to even ask them about it. Wait, aren't you going to talk about John of Gischala? Aren't you going to talk about what Josephus wrote? No, we don't even know to ask. Generally, in the Olivet Discourse, they take verses and twist and morph them to get them to say what they want. In this case, they just remove it. Does that sound like that's something an honest person would do? Is that such an insignificant event? What happened between 66 and 70 AD? The temple was decimated. Things went on in that temple that had never taken place in there before. Josephus was heartbroken as he heard testimony from people who were there, because there was a slow trickle, even during the siege, where people would find a way to get over that wall or dig under it and get away from John and his men. And they would tell Josephus, the Romans could look into the city. They built embankments high enough to look into the city, but there were still things they didn't know what was happening behind closed doors. And Josephus learned even more things about what was going on. And he wrote and said, no city has ever existed that suffered like Jerusalem suffered before the Romans even broke through the wall and got in. It's an amazing time, and we don't know about it? Doesn't that tell you something is wrong here? Do you know who does listen to his writing? The Jews. The Jews hate Josephus. You know why? Because he tells the story basically without even knowing it, I think, of how Jesus' prophecies were fulfilled. They hate that. They know more about it than we do. How is that even possible? Do you even know that God saved Josephus' life so that he would be there to write what he wrote, almost 900 pages, the complete works of Josephus? People are not even aware of his life story. His life story is unbelievable. But as a priest in the temple, we now know, of course, that the priests were on some sort of rotation. And when they weren't doing what they needed to do in the temple, when they were free to do something else, Josephus, and I assume many others, acted as circuit judges, sort of. They went out into Israel, town to town, and settled disputes about the law or something that had come up. He carried, as a priest, some authority. He lived an amazing life. And when Vespasian and his son Titus were sweeping through Israel on their way to Jerusalem, they came across the little town that Josephus happened to be in. And Josephus used his great mind to help the Jews in that town stave off the Romans. And it frustrated the Romans outside. They were like, man, who's ever leading these people knows what he's doing. He's a very clever guy. Finally, Vespasian and Titus, it took them a few days. It should have taken them a half an hour, but it took them a few days to get through the wall of that city. And the first thing they wanted to know when they interrogated people, who was your leader? And they told him, a man, he's a priest in the temple called Josephus. Where is he? We don't know. We haven't seen him. Josephus was hiding in an underground room with a few other people, and he got ratted out. And Vespasian and Titus said, bring him to us before we execute him. We want to have a little talk with him. They were mad that he had wasted so much of their time as they were heading to Jerusalem. And they brought Josephus to them. And Vespasian or Titus said, so you're the one that wasted so much of our time. And Josephus's response was something, I'll paraphrase it. He said to that, well, it's not every day that you get to meet two Caesars. And Vespasian and Titus looked at each other and looked back at him and said, are you that ignorant? We aren't Caesars. We're generals in the Roman Empire army. And Josephus said, oh, I know that. But last night, God showed me in a dream that you, pointing to Vespasian, will be Caesar. And you, pointing to Titus, will follow him. You both will be Caesar. God has appointed it. And that set them back on their heels, because this possibly was a man that was hearing from God, even the God of Israel. That checked a lot of the boxes for Vespasian and Titus, and they said, take him away for now. And they asked the other people, has he ever exhibited this gift of prophecy? And they told him, well, yeah, he predicted the day you would show up. He told us he had a dream from God, and God told him the exact day you would show up. That's why we were so prepared. We were waiting on you. And Vespasian and Titus said, maybe we ought to take him to Jerusalem with us. He might be useful. And he ended up becoming one of Titus's close friends and advisors. But he should have been put to death that day. Are we aware of that great story? Of course not. Are you aware of this? Do you know what that is? Have you ever heard it? The Testimonium Flavianum or Flavianum. It's a famous, brief couple of sentences that that Josephus wrote about the Lord. Let me show you what the Testimonium Flavianum is all about. Let me just read it to you from his book, Jewish Antiquities. About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. And he goes on for a couple of more sentences talking about how great Jesus was. Now, it's a contested portion of his writings. A certain group of people who hate Jesus and hate the idea that a Jew is calling him out as Messiah say this is a fraud, that this was added to his writings, that Josephus would never have written that, but yet it's in his writings. Maybe it is a fraud. But I know, having read it, that in a couple of other places, when he does speak of Jesus, he's very respectful. The author who translated the copy I read, William Whiston, who lived in the 1700s, he fervently believed that Josephus was a closet Christian, that he was a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. But the point I'm trying to make, whether this is or isn't a fraud, it exists. And it's a highly debated portion of what he wrote. Have you ever heard about it? They don't even want you spending 5 minutes on Josephus, because if you do, you're going to be like me. Why didn't I know about John of Gascala or Gashala? Why didn't I know about all of these massive supernatural events that took place during this era? How come I don't know about the chapter that he describes the interior of the temple? He was a priest of the temple, one of the most fascinating chapters I've ever read in my entire life on any book. What the temple looked like inside. Talk more about that next week, as a matter of fact. Why don't we know any of this? It's story after story after fascinating story that led to the destruction, but also led to the fulfillment of the prophecies that Jesus made 30 years earlier, 33 years earlier, but somewhere along there, when it began in 66 AD. They're up to something. This should never be so foreign to us as they've made it, because they're keeping the truth from us. The second thing is a little different, and it's about this group of verses in the Olivet Discourse. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. That is a straightforward way for all Christians who would be living in this era that we live in, this age called the times of the Gentiles, to make sure that they never followed a false Messiah. It's clear. It's absolutely crystal clear what he is saying here. He is saying, if they say I'm inside somewhere, don't go. I'm not. If they say I'm outside somewhere, don't go, because I won't be. Where the lightning flashes across the sky, that's where I'll be. Where the vultures gather over a corpse, very famous image, especially in desert areas. The vultures would be extraordinarily high up because of the thermals coming off the desert floor as they circled over a corpse. Actually, I did a little study this week on that. They aren't actually over the corpse. They smell death. They have a tremendous ability, olfactory ability to smell, of scent. And so they smell death and they go up in the sky and they can see for miles and they start looking, where's the death? This is what they're doing. They're not really over the carcass waiting to see if it was dead. They know it's dead and they're looking for it. And he's saying that scene that is seen every day, people who live in the desert, something every day is dying in the desert. And he's saying, I'll be there. And then he follows that with saying, I'm coming on the clouds. That's how you will know. Don't look for me down here. I won't be here for that. I'm coming there in the air. It's crystal clear. In Luke 17, he says the same thing. He talks about 2 men will be sleeping, one will be taken, one will be left. Two women will be working, one will be taken, one will be left. And the disciples go, where? Where? What they're saying is, where are they taken, Lord? And he says, where the corpse is, there the vultures gather. There in the air. So not only is he saying when we put them together, Luke 17 and the Olivet Discourse, he's saying, I will be in the air and you will be taken there. This aligns with what Paul talks about at the rapture, and we will meet the Lord in the air. That's exactly one of the things they don't want you to see here, because they want to differentiate what Paul taught about the rapture and what Jesus is saying here. They want you to believe what Jesus is saying here is about his second coming, what they call the second coming at the very end, when he destroys the false prophet and the beast and we get ready for the millennial kingdom. Not the rapture of the church. They want to make sure you think that way. So if he's saying, I'm in the air and I'm going to take you to me in the air, it sounds too much like what Paul is saying. They don't want that. Second of all, they don't want him in the air. They want him touching ground. They want you to believe, well, he starts off up there, but he's coming down because he's got business to handle. No, he's not. He's not. And so when they come to these passages here, they pretend like, gosh, it's so deep, I can't figure it out. It's this trick again. They're doing this, pulling up balls, making balls disappear, so that you don't see it. They want you to believe this is a very difficult to understand passage. Chuck Missler, in one of his videos, he's gone now, he goes through verse by verse the Olivet Discourse. Here's what he says about these verses.
Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even to the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. That's a phrase that scholars still scratch their head. What could that mean?
Yeah, what could they possibly mean? It's so obvious. But the obvious answer damages their ability to get the outcome they want. They don't want him in the air. And so they pretend that this is some secretive thing that just difficult to figure out. Well, here's what Chuck kind of thinks the answer is to that.
Wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Many different views of that verse. I personally suspect, can't prove, I suspect that's just referring to that we will be with Christ, the body of Christ.
Can you believe that? Do you understand what he just said? What he's saying is, it's unbelievable. He's saying that he believes Christ is the corpse and we are the eagles. Folks, it's laughable. It's ridiculous. Now, first of all, he's reading out of a version, the King James Version, that uses eagles there. That Greek word can mean eagles or birds of prey. There is no word, or certainly not when the Bible was written, the New Testament was written, there was not a Greek word for vultures. And so all translators understand that word has to be defined based on context. Eagles don't gather where there's a dead body. That doesn't even make any sense. Vultures do. Vultures will. Vultures will go up in the air and look for it and circle overhead. And most translators understand that. Here are the English translations who don't translate that word as eagles, but as vultures or birds of prey. Okay, the majority do. They understand that. Eagles don't fit there. Chuck Missler knows that. It's another way of confounding us so that you miss the point that he's saying, I will not touch down. I'm not touching down. So don't let them tell you that I'm here, because I won't be. I will be in the air, and I will send my angels out to gather you. Where, Lord? In the air. That's where you will be taken, just like Paul said. But Chuck Missler is not the only one. John Walvoord, the former head of the Dallas Theological Seminary, who's considered by many to be the modern architect of the pre-trib rapture. I have no problem with rapture. I have the problem with what they say the rapture is, because they're ignoring what the Lord is telling us the day it is. But anyway, he's the one that essentially cleaned up the mess that Scofield made in the Scofield Bible and made it look like it was intelligently written for a change. And so here's what he says about this section. A cryptic statement is made in Matthew 24:28. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. What does this mean? When a body dies, the vultures come. At least he recognizes, after all, the man was a scholar. Even though his translation says eagles, he knows it's vultures, and he includes that. I'll give him a little credit for that. When a body dies, the vultures come. Where there is wickedness and moral corruption, judgment must come. Again, they say something that's true. Judgment does come when the Lord comes, but he's not talking about judgment here. Look how he uses it in Luke 17. One will be taken, one will be left. One will be taken, one will be left. Where, Lord? Where the corpse is, the vultures gather. He's not judging people at that time. He's taking the elect. It's not a judgment act. It is a blessing. He's taking the elect. But that's what they don't want you to see. So they throw a little truth at you, hiding the rest of the truth from you. Or in the case of 66 to 70 AD, they just keep all of it from you and never mention it. It's a game they all play. I do not know how they can look in the mirror. I keep waiting for some pastor somewhere who has a little reach, who has a platform that could reach a lot of Christians worldwide and stand up and against what is going on in the church, this turning our backs on the teaching of the Lord. He is talking to us, the people that the church consists of, what he came to build. He's talking to us. This is how he's coming back for us. And Paul 100% agrees. I'll show you a couple more things that they do that has absolutely ruined the Olivet Discourse for millions and millions and millions and millions of Christians worldwide. No update on my sister. We're waiting for her first doctor's visit in a week. Thank you for your prayers. God bless you. I'll see you in a few days.